You're listening to the Black to Business Podcast, an educational podcast providing Black entrepreneurs with the tools and resources to start and grow their businesses. We chat with vetted Black entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and business owners as they provide tips and resources to help take your business to the next level. I'm your host, Monique T. Marshall. Welcome back. If you are new here, I am your host, Monique T. Marshall. If you are an avid listener, thank you so much and welcome back. So today's episode is another solo episode because my plan is to do solo episodes during the entire month of October. Now, we're trying some new things here over at Black to Business, and also we had great reception to the last podcast episode. And as I've mentioned before on the podcast, I want to do solo episodes when I am led to do them. So we had great reception, and I have some things I want to talk about. But also, I was recently listening to a podcast episode. One of these top podcasters, one of the things that they mentioned was that they wish they would have done more solo episodes. She wanted to share with her audience more of her own personal advice when it comes to business, but also continue to establish herself as a leader in the space. Now, this wasn't the first time that I've heard this. I actually heard this earlier this year as well. So I said, why not give it a try? We're doing pretty well when it comes to the solo episodes, and I have some things I want to share. So here we are. So with that being said, today I want to talk about how to create systems in your business, because I think that this is so important to help you save time and work smarter in your business. And if this is something you are struggling with, as I always say, it's never too late to start. Once you know better, you do better. Some of the things I talked about last week were, how do you stay consistent in your business? And one of the things that I spoke about is the importance of systems in being consistent. So this week, I wanted to show you exactly how to create those systems and some of the tips and things that have worked for me in Black to Business, and hopefully they will work for you as well. And as always, you can modify and design them in a way that is beneficial for your business model. So some of the things I'm going to talk about is my favorite tools, and you can also check out these tools at blacktobusiness.com/tools. I'm a big advocate of sharing the tools that we use because these are tools that are tried and true, but I'm also about sharing resources so that they may help you and maybe somebody else that you know. So be sure to check those out at blacktobusiness.com/tools, and that page is called Tools We Use. Also, I'm going to take you behind the scenes of my business and do a lot more when it comes to talking about how we use these systems in the business and how you can audit what systems you are using, maybe add some, maybe take some away. And I think that these systems and tools are good for no matter what industry you're in. So that's why I'm going to share these tools in particular, because I know some people have service businesses, and I'm pretty sure we have some listeners who have some product-based businesses. So these are also beneficial for you. Now, first things first is I always like to talk about why this is important for me. And I say that this topic is important when it comes to creating systems. It's because I live by systems. It's something that has saved me a lot of time. It's something that has saved me a lot of money, but it's also helped me to feel more confident when it comes to handing over tasks to, new team members or things that are important. Maybe it's contractors. So I know these systems work, and I will say that this did not happen overnight. And I feel confident when my team can do them because they aren't always starting from scratch. So I think it's important to create these systems so that if you're a one-person show, it's you doing it for now. But regardless, start to write down these systems and tools that are working. But then it makes it easier to hand over these tasks to future team members. So first, let's start by talking about what are business systems. So in short, a business system is a procedure, process, method, or course of action designed to achieve a specific result. And ultimately, they are the keys to success. So think about a car. It needs a smoothly running system to be able to run. So now that you know what business systems are, let's talk about why they're important for your business. Now, I will say that initially, as I said, this all took me some time. But one day I was like, okay, you really have to get focused, write down things, because if you want to hire people, if you want to not do things and start from scratch each and every time, it's important to create a process. So what I noticed is that these things allowed me to save time. So huge time saver, whether it makes you more organized, you know where everything is, and you can train current and future team members. So current meaning, hey, you decide, I don't have any systems in place right now, but I have a team. But I decided today that I'm going to start afresh and I want to implement some systems. So just letting your team know, hey, these are how some things are going to go, and it's okay to start now that you know better. And then for future team members, it's about, documenting these things, which is what we're going to talk about, so that you already have these systems in place so that you can simply hand them off. Another important thing that it does for your business is it is a productivity booster. So one of the things we're going to talk about is managing and tracking that time to see, okay, where are certain things happening that can be cut, or what are some things that can be done that can save time and allow you to boost your productivity. And another thing is it's a error minimizer. So once you know where everything is, how everything goes, less mistakes are to be made. Now note, again, no matter what stage you're in your business, it's not too late to start creating systems, because your future self will thank you. Trust me on this. So let's talk about some of the things you want to do before you start to create these systems. So first things first is you want to document each action that needs to happen in order to complete a task. And when you're documenting these things, you want to be honest and write every little thing out from start to finish, no matter how small the task is. So some examples of things you might want to document are producing a podcast episode. For example, that's the bulk of my business. So I document each step that it takes to complete a podcast process. Another thing is you want to document maybe how you schedule social media posts, or posting a product or a service on your website, or even scheduling an email, etc. Maybe it's setting up a payment processor. What's the steps if somebody wants a refund? What's the steps for shipping? Now, one of the reasons I say you want to document each action that it takes to complete a task, which is essentially a goal, whether it be to produce a podcast episode and then launch that episode, is because you're going to be auditing what are some ways that I can do these things more efficiently. So for example, I used to do Black to Business podcast all alone. And even still in that process, I started to write down what's taking place, what little actions are taking place in order for me to produce an entire episode. So one of the things is once I got help, I was able to simply hand over that task. And I remember my assistant, when they first got the task list, one of the things everyone always says is like, you have everything documented. And I contribute that to the fact that I went to school for supply chain management and I studied project management. And so I'm a systems girl. But one of the things they say is, you have all of these tasks written down. And I tell you, I want to say we have about, when it comes to the tasks, when it comes to producing a podcast episode, it's about 40 tasks in all, 40 something tasks in all. But it's a simple process, honestly. That's what I always tell my team. It's like, it's a simple process once you get in the habit of it. So that's one of the things that they notice is like, okay, it's written down. It looks like a lot at glance, but ultimately it's like, I know where everything is in order for me to complete this task. So if somebody is handling different aspects of the podcast, say one day that they're out, or God forbid, I lose a team member, someone is able to immediately go in and pick up that work. So again, this is why it's so important to create these systems now, or once you have the time, which is now. No time better than now. So again, some of the things you want to document is each action that it takes to complete a task. And then once you do that, you want to complete a task audit. So you want to decide what can be taken away, what can be added in order for you to become more efficient. And in all those 40 something tasks that I have minimized taking stuff out, added stuff, forgotten little things. And One of the things I said in the beginning of this is that you want to write every little thing down, no matter how small, because when you're handing it over to someone, it can become a headache when you forget a small step, because they then don't complete the step, and then you could become frustrated, but it's only your fault. So again, write down the smallest of tasks. I'm trying to think about what's the smallest task when it comes to creating a podcast episode. Possibly, scheduling like a thank you email, or scheduling a newsletter. For example, we schedule our newsletters, but we also have to edit and draft those newsletters. So a different task might be, for example, draft the newsletter, edit the newsletter, schedule the newsletter to send. So those are how small the task can be. And then, maybe it's scheduling it. Not only we say, for example, getting so simple as saying, not just scheduling the social media post for social media, we say schedule it on Instagram, schedule it on Facebook, schedule it on LinkedIn, but also schedule it on stories. So that's how small you want to get when it comes to creating these systems. And again, task audit, if something can be taken away, do so, or something can be made even a subtask of a task. That's totally fine. And another important steps when it comes to creating these systems and documenting, you want to time track tasks. Now, what I mean by time tracker tasks is how long is it taking you or someone on your team to complete this task from start to finish. And I advise taking or tracking at least 2 to 3 times so that this gives you an average of how long it'll take. And the reason that I'll do this, especially as a one-person team is because say you're ready to hire someone or delegate this task out. What you'll notice is in the beginning, if you're doing it, it's likely that they're not going to do it as fast as you do it, especially in the beginning. So one of the things I always tell new team members or new assistants is that what I do is I allocate how much time it's taking me to complete the task. And then I allocate an additional 50% of that time on to say, okay, this is roughly how long it'll take you. So for example, if it takes me an hour to complete the task, I'll say it might take you an hour and a half to complete the task. And this is especially in the beginning because you give that buffer space and you're not frustrated, it should be taking you longer to complete this. It just makes everything easier and it allows you to be empathetic, especially when someone is first coming onto your team. They're already likely nervous about doing things right. So you want to make sure that you give grace. And another thing you want to do is take inventory of the current tools that you are using in your business. So when it comes to creating these systems, a lot of times you're going to need tools. So whether it's payment processors, email service providers, social media schedulers, all of that needs to be taken into consideration. Whether you're using a free resource or a paid resource, you have to decide what tools are you currently using, and then to take an inventory of those tools and begin to decide what's working, what can be used better, because there are so many tools, especially nowadays, that allow you to do multiple things. So what can really, you want to maximize that tool. Make sure you know the ins and outs of that tool, because what'll happen is a lot of times you can get rid of tools that you already have. So for example, I'll say one of the tools that a lot of guests talk about, and we use it within Black to Business, is also listed on our tools we use page, is ClickUp. And I love ClickUp because it's not only a project management tool, but it allows you to do so many things like store documents, create forms, intake forms. And so what we used to use is we had so many tools where we still use Google Drive to have documents. But the good thing about learning the ins and outs of a tool, like for example, I'm saying ClickUp, for you it might be something else, is learning the ins and outs meant that ClickUp, a lot of these tools, especially nowadays, integrate with a lot of other tools. So the beautiful thing about ClickUp is it allows you to integrate with Google Drive. Also, we were using Typeform, which is a form similar to Google Form. But what happened is ClickUp introduced their own forms, and what we did in this case is we took away the forms with Typeform and now we just use everything through ClickUp. So it made everything so much easier, and then also it allowed us to auto-populate tasks once people submit their forms. So learning the ins and outs of ClickUp, and those tools, a lot of tools are so robust, you may or may not need the features that they have. So we're still learning things about ClickUp that we like. And anytime they're introducing something, we're like, okay, maybe we can cut this, because that not only helps save time from clicking from task to task, software to software, but it also allows you to make better use of the money that you're spending in the business expenses. Because as these tools get more robust and as you use the tools more, of course, you incur more costs. That's something that you want to keep in mind. Again, deciding what could be used better, and also deciding what you need to get rid of, and then deciding what could be added. And in all of this, take into consideration your costs, because you want to be tracking your costs to make sure that you are budgeting, but also being, smart when it comes to making financial decisions. Next, we're going to talk about, you have all of the ways to complete a task, audit a task, time track your tasks, and then you're going to take inventory of those tasks. So the next step is, how do you actually create these systems? Now, before we dive into this, I briefly mentioned that you want to look at the systems and tools that you're using, and I want to recommend some of the tools that have worked for us. And again, these may be useful no matter what industry you're in. So one of the things you want to make sure you have is a virtual document store. We use Google Drive and we also use Dropbox because they're good for different things. Of course, Google Drive for the most part is free. Dropbox is free until a certain level, but there are things that are better suited for Dropbox. Another thing that Dropbox offers is their Hello Signature. So it allows us to send contracts, get documents signed with either contractors within our organizations or outside of our organization. So again, making sure that you explore all the uses of these platforms. So get a virtual document store, because this is what's going to allow you to document these processes. And then another thing you want to have is, of course, the project management tool. We use ClickUp, and there are other ones like Monday, Asana, so many other ones, but we use ClickUp and recommend that one. I used to use Asana and Trello, but I just found that ClickUp was so much better for me. So whatever works for you, don't spend time like switching from another platform if you don't have to. Next, you want to have a virtual meeting or event platform. So we use Zoom or Google Meet. And we love Zoom because it integrates, again, with a lot of tools. So when it comes to creating these systems, it's important to think about what integrates with other tools. So you can go on their website, and a lot of times they list integrations, and under that they will list what are some other tools that are compatible with this. So for example, another tool that we recommend is having an online appointment scheduler. We use Acuity, but there are other amazing ones. We're considering switching to either Calendly or Undock, but those are two Black-owned appointment schedulers. So for example, we use Acuity, and I know Calendly and Undock. I know Undock just recently introduced that they integrate with Zoom, because we use it also for other things within the business. So what you want to use is something that integrates with these other tools. So you have your online appointment scheduler. Say someone goes in and they schedule an appointment with you. Zoom allows you to either do it via phone call, they can dial in, or they can do a video meeting. Another good thing about Zoom is, say you want to have a webinar or online event. You can do that with Zoom, and it's pretty affordable in a sense for you to be able to do it. I know they have a free option as well. Next, you want to think about task automation software. So these are things like Zapier. We're also going to note all of these things and resources in our show notes, so don't worry. So task automation software has really saved our life. And that's another thing that allows you to integrate some of the tools that may not integrate on their own. So it allows you to automate. And automation is great because if you're a small team, sometimes you don't have the budget to hire always. So it's important to look for other ways to make things easier and faster. So a task automation software like Zapier is so great. One of the ways that we use it is, say for instance, if someone buys one of our paid products, it automatically adds them to our mailing list if they choose yes. So that's so great because we aren't manually adding people to our email list. Like, you don't have to go in and say, okay, such and such bought this. Now let me add them to our email list. And a lot of times what this does is it minimizes the admin time. So you don't need an actual person to do that. What you might need is a person to actually manage that, making sure it's always working smoothly, making sure the automation software isn't broken in any sense. So that might mean going in once or twice a week to make sure that things are working smoothly. And in some case, once or twice every other week. So it doesn't actually require a person for you to like input those email addresses. Another thing is I recommend a screen recording app, and we use Loom. I love it. And I'm going to share with you how I use Loom. Now, Loom allows you to record your screen, and you can record a presentation, but we mostly use it for screen recording. So what I do is I'll go in and say my team, we need to create another training. And I create trainings based on, I have my standard trainings that I have. So what I'll do is I'll use a virtual document store like Google Drive. And what I'll do is I create a template, one sheet page. It's called trainings. And on that, I have different bullet points and I have sub points. So for example, I have questions about the podcast, how to create an invite for a podcast guest. And so I create a training based on that. And so how I use Loom is I actually share my screen, and I actually share the whole process from start to finish on how to create an actual invite. And the reason that I don't create a whole 20-minute presentation on how to produce a podcast episode from start to finish, because what will happen is sometimes when you have a total product, say for example, our podcast, one person might not be doing the task from start to finish. So it's easier to break it up in a sense and have people watch what's needed to be watched. So that's the great thing about Loom. Another software that allows you to, similarly to screen record, it actually allows for screen capturing. And similar to Loom, you can actually capture each task, is Tango. So Tango is great as well, and it's free. Loom also has a free package. So screen recording has saved us so many times. And not only do I use it for training, another way that I use it is, say if you don't want to hop on a meeting each time someone is having difficulty or they have a question that needs to be answered, you can't really explain it in email, and a meeting is not necessary. So you know those sayings like, this could have been an email. Well, sometimes it can't be an email. Sometimes it doesn't necessarily need to be a meeting, but it can't be an email. And what it might mean is like, let me share my screen with you and show you exactly my thought process, and then we can go back and forth maybe in the comments. So Loom allows you to have like comments on that particular video. So a lot of times what I'll do is if someone on my team submits a task, I would just go in and say, hey, I'm going to show you exactly my thought process and why I'm editing this in real time. And they love that. And I do that a lot, especially when it comes to creating podcast outlines. I talk to the person who helps me and let them know, okay, this is the reason why I'm changing it. And I'm able to share my screen with them and they see exactly what I'm changing. And speaking on that, another reason why a virtual document store is so important as opposed to maybe a Word on your computer is that I love Google Drive in a sense. I have everybody that submits something that wants to give feedback. I have them submit it to me on Google Drive, and all they have to do is share permissions with me to allow me to edit, to view the document. And what I'll do is I'll go into suggestion mode in that document, and I'll just make suggestions, and they can accept or decline those suggestions. But it allows me to like go in real time versus, maybe on a Word document, you're turning the font red, and that's just so much harder to me. So I use Google Drive a lot, and it's stored in the cloud. So the next thing is that now that you have all of these systems, I think this is a good start so that you aren't overwhelmed. So the way that I organize my systems in a sense is I have these trainings so that my team has access to this one document, and all you're going in and doing is embedding certain links. So for example, if you have multiple trainings, as you begin to document these processes, you're creating these trainings, maybe on Loom you decide to use. All you're doing is embedding that link into that training document. So I highly recommend creating a document on Google Drive that's called trainings. Even if you do or you don't have a team, do this. And this is a part of creating those systems and processes. And then embed those links. Then next thing you want to do is share it with the appropriate people. So the great thing about Google Drive is it allows you to share it with certain people, and you can restrict these sharing links with people who are outside of the organization, so they might not be able to see them. So that is so important. And then once you begin to do that, the next step is that you want to create the systems. Now, when it comes to creating systems, I recommend once you have taken an inventory of the tools that you're using and you decide, okay, some of the tools that Monique recommended might be really helpful for me, I'm going to implement those. So you create that final list of tools that you want to use and their functions. So another document that I have in addition to the training document is I have a tools we use page. And what I do is I essentially document all the tools that we have are using in Black to Business. And I ask people who are onboarding, are you familiar with any of these tools? Because that might be important for you. That's like being hired for a job and they're asking, do you have any Salesforce experience? Well, you want to look at the tools, have a centralized location where you list these tools to ask someone if you're interested in hiring them, do you have experience in using these tools? Because that's important to think about if you're going to decide if you have to train them on this tool or if it's worth it to introduce a whole new tool and system. So it might be better for you to find someone that's already familiar. If it's something that's not too far off, like for example, if you ask them, do you have experience with Acuity, which is the meeting scheduler? I don't say no if they have experience with Calendly or Undock, because essentially there aren't that many differences. No offense, but there aren't that many differences. That's something that you also want to think about, is always having these centralized locations so that you're working smarter and not harder. So you create the list of tools and their functions. So if people have not heard of a tool, they understand at least what it's used for. So once you've created the list of tools you use and your functions, the next step is documenting all the actions and tasks in the central location. So you want to actually begin to document in an organized way what are all the actions that need to take place in order for this task to be completed. Because before you would kind of like brainstorm, okay, what action is going to take place in order for this task to be completed? But you might not have necessarily listed it in an order. So what you want to do is note what order these actions need to take place. And then you have to know which tools and resources are needed to complete these tasks. And then you can go on to say, okay, now that I know what tools and resources are needed, who's going to be responsible for each task? Again, if you're a one-person show, I say get in the habit of putting your name there just as a placeholder, because essentially you are doing it now, but you're going to be outsourcing it eventually. So we're going to claim that for you. And then, of course, note the time it takes to create and do the task. So in all of this, when it comes to documenting, the next step is creating your SOP. And so we talk about this in the business world. It's the standard operating procedure. And what this looks like is that document that is dedicated to that particular task. Remember, the task is essentially the end goal. The actions or the subtasks are the steps that need to take place in order to complete the task or meet that goal. So you want to think about the task completion as a goal. So what a standard operating procedure could look like is you have one document and you're going to say, okay, what's the time it takes me to complete this SOP? How many minutes, how many hours is it going to take? And you can list this in 2 to 3 sentences. You can write a brief description of why behind this SOP. Include why it's important and how it will be used inside your business, because people have a reason or a purpose to why they're creating or doing this task. And that's so good, because I always say it's important to know why you're doing something, no matter if it's the bigger vision, but even these smaller tasks. And then you want to have that general headline, that general guidelines header if it's applicable. So you can use this to include any general information or necessary guidelines or principles that are needed for someone to perform the task. And you don't have to type this statement every time you make an SOP, but only when it makes sense, you want to include the general guideline header. And then after that, you introduce your steps. So if there are different steps, again, actions, you'll put a description and then the title of that step. And that's essentially how you create a simple SOP, standard operating procedure. So the next step to creating these systems is you want to create templates whenever necessary. And when I say templates, it's because I don't want you to always start from scratch. Like, the purpose of this whole conversation is to have you to work smarter and not harder, so that you're saving time and energy and spending your time and energy on the things that make more sense. And so when I say create systems, you want to create canned responses when it's necessary. So for example, what you have is the virtual document store. I have a document that's listed as canned responses. And basically it's based on those frequently asked questions that we get, or those frequently asked inquiries that we get. And all it does is you basically copy and paste that, but then of course you go in and modify it to make it personalized, but you are not starting from scratch. And so what you want to do is create a canned response document, and that is a living document that could grow at any time. So I'll give you an example of a canned response that we use, or an area that we use a canned response, and how it integrates with our system. So for example, when we have a podcast, as a podcast hoster, we have people who are interested in being on the podcast. Instead of us receiving numerous emails, what we do is we encourage people to, and you kind of like, this is great for if you want to kind of like train, not train, I don't like that word, but maybe like guide your customers in how you do business. So for example, if we had so many email inquiries coming in, it would be a lot of admin work. So what we do is we create canned or auto responses as well. So that's something that automatically goes out in your email, and you can set it based on different words. That's a whole nother thing. But for this example, I'll say we use a canned response. So say if someone is interested in being on a podcast and they email us directly, what we have is we have a template that we use. We have two templates. If the person is reaching out on behalf of themselves, or they have a representative reaching out on behalf of them, because that's mostly what we get. So we have a response and say, hey, thank you for being interested in podcasts. Please fill out the form here, and we link it to the form that we use through ClickUp. And if we find that you're a great fit, someone from our team will reach out to you, or something similar to that. So what happens is they are directed to that form, and there's certain information that they must fill out that makes it easier for us to decide if they're a great candidate for the show. And this is the same form that we use on our website. So when you go to the Black to Business website, there's a tab that's called podcast. You can click down, and the drop down says listen, and the drop down also says be a guest. And then that be a guest directs them directly to that form. So that's another way that we created a canned response that integrates with the systems that we already have. So what you want to do is, and this has not happened overnight. We did not used to do that. We found that, okay, this is taking us a lot of time. So we found a way to be more efficient. And this is what we came up with. And I'm sure in the future that might change. But for now, it's been working for the past 2 years. So again, you want to create a canned response to those frequently asked questions. And then, of course, when it comes to creating templates, you want to create Loom videos, or those tangos. Again, documenting the processes and having a system in place to where you provide feedback to your team so that they get a better understanding of the vision that you have. And then once you've created the templates where they are necessary, the next step that you want to do is to place all of these tasks into a project management tool. Now, what I recommended before is we use ClickUp, but you can use Monday, Asana, whatever that works for you. Basecamp is another one. So what you do is you take all of the tasks, and I'll speak from a ClickUp's perspective. So what they allow you to do is you create this major task, and within that task, they allow you to create those subtasks. So those subtasks would be those actions. So that's how you could make sure that you are transferring all of these steps into a project management software. And one of the things I love to do, and hopefully your system that you decide to use allows you to do this too, is I'm all about not starting from scratch whenever it's necessary. So one of the things I like to do is I'll create a main template. So for example, each person that applies and it is approved to be on the podcast, we create a profile or a task it's basically like an overarching task goal for that person. So they have their own profile. And then what we do is we assign those subtasks to that person. So it's like create Monique Marshall's graphic. Make sure that you send Monique the thank you. Make sure you schedule the episode. And so in order for me to not do that for each and every person over and over, what I do is I create a main template. And what ClickUp allows you to do is you can duplicate. So then I have this main template, and the main template has all of these subtasks in it. And so when a new guest is approved or a new person is signed up to be on the podcast, I just duplicate that task and change that name from main template or template to that person's name. So for example, it would be Monique. So I tell you that to say, if you can create a go-to template, and then wherever it allows you to duplicate that and just rename it. So again, this is to work smarter and not harder, and you're not starting from scratch each time. And another thing that might be helpful is sometimes these project management tools are not as cute or visually appealing. And a lot of people, based on how they learn, some people are more visual learners. So say if you want to create an overarching visual picture, another tool that we use is Milanote. It makes things so much prettier and visual, and then you can go in and add little links wherever are necessary. So once you've created and transferred these tasks into a project management tool, the last and final step would be to delegate. And if you don't have a team, that's okay. You can still get ahead of the curve and begin to create these processes, especially if you've been in business and you're seeing that you're doing this thing over and over again. That's likely something that you need to create a system and process for. So if you don't have a team for the time being, put yourself as the person that's doing it. And then when you get someone on your team, you can change the name to their name. And the purpose of me going over all of this is to prepare you for growth, but to also encourage you to work smarter. And it's okay if you don't have a team or you're a one-person show. You got to start somewhere. Another thing I want you to remember is that you don't need to reinvent the wheel every time, and you don't have to start over every time. And where you can, you should focus on saving time, because this has really helped me preserve my time and energy for those bigger tasks. And again, a lot of the things that I share on the Black to Business podcast and what I want to begin to share is things that are working for me and my business, and the things that I know could help you in your business, no matter what industry you're in. In any industry, you're going to need to create systems. In any industry, you're going to need to have a project management tool. I am encouraging you to take stuff very seriously and operate in excellence. And finally, I want to leave you with this. This is all something that takes time, but again, your future self will thank you. And start small. One of the things I recommend, especially for me, this did not happen overnight. I worked on Black to Business by myself for a long time. And these are things I started to implement slowly. Like, I encourage you, if you're overwhelmed, to just do something every week to create the systems. And again, track yourself doing it 2 to 3 times, especially if you're a small team. Get somebody, if you have a virtual assistant, get them in on it, have them to track how long it's taking them to do it, because God forbid they leave your business. You don't always have to start from scratch, or say if it's something that only they know how to do. You want to make sure that they're documenting this so that in their absence, you're able to do it, or you're able to get somebody to dive right in and do it as well. So if these tasks are repetitive, I always recommend a system. And you can always change up as you go, whether it be things you improve on how you can do things, or you get somebody on the team who can do it better, and just change as you go. Change is okay, because that means that you're growing. and whether it means your staff grows or your budget increases, so that you can introduce some of these tools and softwares that allow you to automate this process. Like I said before, I recommend some of these tools that I do because a lot of them they have free tiers, but a lot of them are also low cost. So again, you want to start with what's affordable to you. I thank you all so much for listening to this episode, and I really enjoyed sharing what I know. I'm all about sharing the love and the resources. And of course, on Black to Business, I've learned a lot of things from people who have been guests on the show. Some of the tools that they've used, I never even heard of. And what I did was I decided, okay, if they're using it in this way, maybe that'll work for Black to Business. And sometimes I do find that those things work. So hopefully what I discussed today, you find that it works for you in your business. So I encourage you to understand that you are starting when you start, and that you know better, and now you're doing better, and that it is never too late to start. And I also encourage you to share this episode with a friend or come back to listen to this episode. And if you love it so much, you can tag me on Black to Business's social media at Black to Business across Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and we also have a LinkedIn page. So tag us to let us know how you enjoyed this episode. And if you want to check out the resources that I mentioned during this episode, you can go to blacktobusiness.com/117. Thank you so much for listening. I love you very, very dearly, and I am so proud of you for investing in yourself. Not only when I don't believe in investing only when it comes to money, but I think it's important to invest your time to learning more, to improving how you're doing things. So I just want to say I'm so proud of you, and I encourage you to take your business to the next level because we need you. The Black community needs you. You are inspiring someone, so please keep going. And I always think about, why would I quit today when tomorrow might be the day that I win? So I just want to leave you with that, and thank you again for supporting us as we support you. And I will chat with you next week, same time, same place.